Welcome back, everyone. It's time for another spectacular bake along, and check this out. We're making a layer cake. This is my lemon spice layer cake. And I'll start off by showing you how to make the cake layers, which is almost like gingerbread, but not as dense and heavy. In fact, it's light and fluffy. And speaking of light and fluffy, well, the lemon mascarpone cream that fills and tops this cake, oh, it is luscious. A few fresh berries and you are ready for a special occasion. Join me for my lemon spice layer cake. I love when you can make a light and airy cake batter without having to pull out the mixer. And that's what this cake is like. Even though with the spices, it might remind you of gingerbread, it's got a lighter, fluffier texture to it. Now, I'll start by combining my wet ingredients in the bowl. And this is an oil-based cake, so it stays nice and moist and soft in the fridge because I will have that mascarpone cream filling in between the layers and on top. I'll also add my sugars. That includes brown sugar and granulated sugar. And I'll call it a sugar because it is my fancy molasses. And it's not as much as I would use if I was making a traditional autumn gingerbread cake, but it adds the color and that hint of flavor. And my last wet ingredient before I give this a mix is my buttermilk. If I'm making something like a ranch dressing, and now that I have a cook-along series right here on the channel, you can go check out my ranch dressing. I rely on the buttermilk for something like that, where the buttermilk is a key flavor. But in a recipe like this, if you don't have access to buttermilk, you measure out this same volume of milk, take out, for this volume, take out 2 teaspoons of the milk and replace it with 2 teaspoons of lemon juice. And then that will recreate the acidity, activate your baking soda. You know you're good to go. So let me give this a little whisk first. Just to get that sugar dissolving. The inspiration for this cake is actually my wedding cake, which I made over 25 years ago, but it was an October wedding, but I didn't want a heavy spice cake, but I made this similar style cake with just that cream topping with the open-sided look that is just so appealing and appetizing. And I just have a couple of lumps in my brown sugar, don't I? Well, with the continued stirring, I'll break down those last couple of lumps. In the meantime, I'll add my 3 eggs. And because we're using oil, it doesn't really matter what temperature the eggs are. If you store your eggs in the fridge, they can come right from the fridge. If they're at room temp, that's perfectly fine too. Break those down a second. And now let's work in some more flavor beyond the molasses. When I make a ginger cake like this, I don't want that heavy, dried ginger flavor. I want that sparkle of fresh ginger. So I'm gonna grate in about a tablespoon of fresh ginger. Ooh, and that is fresh ginger. I can smell it. I got one little, that would have been a surprise bite for someone. There we go. Extract that little piece. In addition to the ginger, I want to layer in some lemon flavor. So I'll add some zest. I'm going to rely on that mascarpone cream for more of the lemony tartness. Just because adding lemon juice to a cake batter can sometimes mess with its consistency. You don't end up with a smooth batter. And between the buttermilk and molasses itself actually has a little acidity to it, even though it's sweet first with a hint of bitterness, that is enough that when you add your lemon zest, it works and it sort of makes your mind think. It's got that extra level of lemon flavor to it. So whisk this in. And now for the dry ingredients, which I'm simply going to sift over top. So let me make room and move my whisk out of the way. I've measured out my all-purpose flour. And for leavening, I've got a combination of baking powder, and not the little dish, and some baking soda. So the baking soda activates first in the bowl, gets everything lifting. The baking powder, because it's double acting, needs the heat to really rise, kicks in later on. And that's how I get a cake that ends up being nice and level on top, by controlling that lift as the cake bakes. For a little added spice, a touch of cinnamon, and just a little bit of allspice, and I'll grate in some nutmeg as well after my hands are free here. So not quite as much spice as an autumn gingerbread, but still the spice flavor is there. And I think this part of my zester is dry. I'll grate in a little nutmeg. With these 3 measurements of cinnamon, allspice, and nutmeg, if you have pumpkin pie spice, you could add 1.5 teaspoons of that in place of these 3 separate spices. Now this makes a fluid batter. It's pourable, so you can continue with the whisk. Get everything combined, and then take a minute. Doing this by hand without the mixer, I do like to give it an extra whisk once it's combined to build a little structure into the cake batter, just so it does bake up nice and fluffy. So right now you can see there's still a few lumps. Once you mix this vigorously by hand, it will smooth out, and then you know you're ready. Now, just because I'm doing this by hand, don't let that stop you. You can put all these ingredients in the mixer and just put the paddle attachment, not the whip attachment, and whip it up in no time if you'd rather. And I can see that lump of brown sugar is still there. I might have to extract it once it goes into the cake pans if I can't see it here. There we go, that's smoothing out. It's a nice pale caramel color. So this is ready for my pans. I've got 3 8-inch cake pans. I'm using springform because that's what I have for an 8-inch pan. You can use just regular cake pans without the latch on them. I've greased them. I put parchment in the bottom, and then I floured the sides just to ensure that the cake batter won't stick. Now I'll divide the batter between the 3 pans. I think this needs a little extra batter. And it doesn't look like a lot of batter, but it will double in size when it bakes. And I can see, because it is such a thin layer, oh, hello, lump of sugar. Be gone with you. Now I'll just give the pan a quick tap. Make sure that batter is spreading. There we go. And I'll pop these into my oven, which I've preheated to 325 Fahrenheit. And these take about 25 minutes to bake. You test by inserting a skewer in the center. When it comes out clean of any crumbs, you know your cake layers are baked. Here are the cake layers out of the oven, and you can see it's a paler color of gingerbread, and it's definitely a light type of sponge. These have had a chance to cool completely. You can make these ahead, wrap them and freeze them if you want. Just thaw them on the counter before it's time to assemble. And speaking of, let's make this beautiful lemon mascarpone cream. And I will start with a full tub of mascarpone cheese, which is thick and creamy and just has a level of richness to it that is heavenly. So I'm just softening it up. It depends on the brand of the mascarpone. It can be smooth or it can be quite set. This is beautifully creamy. I am thrilled. Now I have my icing sugar already measured, and I'm going to put half of it in my mascarpone cheese to soften it. I'm going to save the other half for my whipped cream. You don't have to measure, just guess as you add it. This will soften up the mascarpone a little bit, making it easier to fold in the cream. You may in this process want to switch to a whisk just to make sure everything is nice and smooth. And once I add my lemon juice, at first it might be fluid, but then it's going to set up. That's the magic of the acidity of the lemon juice. But first I want to add some zest, building on that lemon flavor. If you go into the search function on my Oh Yum homepage and just type in lemon, wait until you see how many desserts and recipes show up. I do like my lemon desserts, it's true. In goes that, along with my fresh lemon juice. For a recipe like this, where you want lemon to be a star, I always use fresh lemon juice. If it's just a small addition that's secondary, maybe it's there for the acidity, but not the function of flavor, I always add a little lemon juice to my pie crust recipe. It is okay to use bottled in that case, but when lemon is the star, it's gotta be fresh lemon juice. Oh, and it is thickening up. Wow. Okay, that lemon juice goes right to work. The acidity grabbing onto the fat within the mascarpone cheese, and that's what gives this cream filling and topping fluffiness, but yet structure so it stays in place. Now, my other move is to add the remaining icing sugar to my already whipped cream. So really, that's the only time you need to pull out the mixer or the hand beaters is to whip your cream. And a cup of cream, well, you can, if you wanted to, you could whip it by hand. I could have gone for a bigger bowl, but no. Working with this tiny little bowl. Because of the spice and complexity of the cake itself, if I were just doing a lemon cake with this lemon mascarpone topping, which I highly recommend, especially if you're going to put berries on top of it, I would add vanilla. But because there's so much going on with the spice and the molasses and then the lemon zest, I just save my vanilla for another recipe. It's not necessary. Okay, so that's worked in. Now I'm going to fold the cream into the currently setting mascarpone cheese. So this will fluff it up a little bit. This makes a stable, essentially it's a mousse as much as it's a cream because it's got that aerated whipped cream in it to give it volume and fluffiness. But it sets up so beautifully that I have used this filling for ages as a decadent filling for a wedding cake. And you can suspend strawberries or blueberries or raspberries within it. And you get a beautiful clean slice, even if your filling is this thick in between the cake layers. But I'm simply using this on its own in between the cake layers, and then I'll add some fresh fruit on top. Which is what I did with my wedding cake, except I don't think I have a single picture of a wedding cake. There might be someone in my family might have a shot of the cake, it's in the background, or maybe they have a picture of the cake. But guess what? I didn't have time to take pictures of the cake. And then it was cut and consumed before we knew it. Okay, so we've got this luscious cream and we're ready to assemble the cake. I don't need to bother with a cake wheel because once you assemble this, it is ready to serve. But if you're storing it and you obviously don't have the height in your fridge, well, you can put it on a plate and transfer it later. So I go for just generous dollops of cream in between my layers here because it is so stable and not a shaky, it's not like using just straight whipped cream to assemble a cake, which is a lot more fragile and also temperature sensitive. Another reason it was a good choice for a wedding cake. Make sure I've got it on straight. Yes. I can smell that lemon. And I can pick up a hint of the light gingerbread spice. Not a common combination, but one that definitely works. Okay, so this is level now, and I did reserve just a little bit of cream just so I could get some height in the center. Just kind of work it into that top level, and then it just makes it easier to stack the fresh berries on top if that's the look you're going for. So I've got blueberries and raspberries here, and I think I'm just going to go for the center look as opposed to a crown or a C shape, which is sometimes common. I'm going to put more blueberries at the bottom just because they're less fragile, less likely to bleed. If you have access to gorgeous seasonal fruits like gooseberries or red currants on the little stems, oh, that would be gorgeous. Yeah, these are beautiful in-season raspberries. So they are soft and delicate and beautiful. fill in with a couple more blueberries here and there. Have I got a nice straight side to the cake, Michael? Oop. And there you have it. A stunning cake, but with complex flavor. It's not just about looks. It's about the fact that you've got this light, fluffy, lemony gingerbread against that creamy, decadent, citrusy filling, fresh berries on top. Let's just do a quick dusting of icing sugar. If you had edible flowers, well, wouldn't that be just a crowning glory right on top? And to make a cake like this by hand, the only time you need the beaters or a mixer is to whip that 1 cup of whipping cream, and yet this is your end result. I think you would deserve to feel very proud making this stunning lemon gingerbread cake. Should I cut into it? I never not cut into it, which means I have to take a picture. I have to make a second one to take a picture later, but we'll worry about that. Anyhow, I always cut into the cake. You deserve to see what it looks like inside to understand that texture. I'm gonna cut a dainty piece just so the fruit doesn't come tumbling down. But even freshly made, it cuts beautifully. There you go. And it will continue to set once it's been in the fridge. Get that. A little bite there. Oh, whoop. Oh, I should put a raspberry on there too. Whoop. When does a cake freshly assembled slice that easily? But don't worry, you can prepare this a full day ahead of time. After you've put the cream on, if you're putting the berries on too, loosely cover it with plastic because you do have the exposed sides to the cake and you don't want it to dry out, where normally a buttercream insulates and protects the cake. But remember, it's an oil-based cake, so it will set up in the fridge just fine and still hold its moisture. So there you have it. You can see the light color of that gingerbread and the delicate sponge, not the least bit crumbly, that decadent lemon cream. What a special cake for someone's special day, be it a wedding, an engagement, a birthday, or a Friday. Any excuse for cake. I'm so glad you can join me here for another Bake Along. You know, I'm alternating my Bake Along and Cook Along episodes now, so you can see me cooking, not just baking. But don't worry, I know you bakers love to see what new things I have in store, and I do have new recipes coming your way. I'll see you again soon. Aw, memories. Actually, now that I think of it, did I even get a chance to eat my own wedding cake? Do people do that? Always with the lemon. Bye, everyone.